Hey! So, I know a couple of you have asked for a recap of the third book. I know I did like a recap already about I think from chapter 20 to chapter 60 or something, or whatever, just like a brief recap before. But I know that with all these updates and pauses in between updates and delays, it can be a little bit confusing. I know the easiest theory is just to read the book. You read the third book, read the first and second book just to have a complete idea of what's going on. But I know sometimes, we're all busy, I'm busy, so it's just better to get a sense of what's going on so you can enjoy the rest of the series without having to commit to, reading the whole thing or, just going through the process all over again. So I know it's since I wrote the series, I should just be able to, at a drop of a dime, just be oh yeah, in chapter 22, this happened. In chapter 38, this happened. Duh. But, even I'm okay, what exactly happened? What's the third book about? Especially because the third book, I kind of feel should be 2 books because there's just so much information. I think it's, right now, like I said, it's 86 chapters, and most of I think the first book only had 30 something chapters. The second book only had maybe 48 chapters, so it's definitely double the first book. So I think maybe that might be the best way to kind of approach doing a recap of the third book. Maybe just a part 1, act 1 breakdown, then an act 2 breakdown. I do apologize if this is very rambly, just because, kind of figuring out as I go along as well. I did reread the book maybe a few months ago just to sort of have a sense of how to end it properly, to make sure that, there are no loose ends and whatnot. And there might be some loose ends that you might see when I do the big, massive update on Sunday of the 13 chapters. So I think chapter 72 to chapter 86. So Sunday, June 9th, before 5 p.m. should have all of the chapters, reading chapters. And then afterwards, probably do maybe another video, maybe an interactive video if you guys are interested. Just discussing the end of the novel and whatnot. So what we're going to do is a recap, but also I know that the most recent chapter kind of ends with the exposure of what the incident is. So this could be a cool time to kind of talk about my motivations with that. I know you waited 3 books for that. And I would love to know your thoughts now, so that way when I do the other video, we can talk more about if you felt the incident and its reveal was interesting or was underwhelming or anything like that. So yeah, so let's talk about the recap first. So basically, I think we all know the beginning of the third book kind of starts kind of similarly to the second book. It's Mirren essentially kind of just is kind of fed up and leaves and then comes back. So basically why she does leave is because Gino didn't want to go forward with the video, or not the video, but the an audio recording that Mirren has when she was at Smiles, where Theodora says that she's the one who's responsible for the soda spill at the Rising Scholar Award Assembly, which we all know that the Rising Scholar Award Assembly was basically in the first book, the very first chapter or so, where there's a soda spill and there's the fight between Mirren and Penelope, and then she ends up losing her award and then sort of propelling the plot of the novel series. So anyways, Theodora is the one responsible for it. Basically, she did it because maybe she was prompted by Penelope, or she thought that Penelope would get aroused from it and then sort of put her in good graces with Gemma, so that way Gemma would sort of encourage her to date Gino, which is what happens. So that's why she ends up being Gino's girlfriend and so forth. So anyways, so in any case, even though she's Gino's ex, Theodora's Gino's ex, he's not very receptive to the idea of throwing her on the bus, just because she's generally a good person, other than this one out of character thing that she did. And it kind of sucks, but he just kind of feels okay, well, there's another way we can take Penelope down. We're not going to take her down because she's not we're not going to take Theodora down because she's not the object of our revenge scheme, essentially. And so Mirren's not happy with that, so she leaves. So she's basically just stays with Parker, and kind of sneaking out of Rinzen, so as if to seem like she's not there, but she's just sort of, not going to class, just kind of needs to clear her head, just kind of think about what's going on. So, but basically what happens is Gino ends up having, Gino and Gemma end up having like a birthday party that she ends up appearing at briefly, just to kind of tell Gino, like, I didn't run away. Obviously I didn't run away because I don't have anywhere to go. But I just need time to kind of simmer it down and move forward. So then we kind of get into more of like, so much stuff. I have like have to have it up. I have the series like pulled up on my laptop right now, just kind of skimming through it. So that happens. I think that's like the first like 6 or so chapters, just of her being gone and then her coming back at his birthday party. So after that, what happens is I think we have more of like Olive kind of trying to do some things. Like she is obviously working on her like documentary like video about Mirren, because she came to the school, St. Rosamond, and she's like, okay, there's a scandal with Mirren and her being dead or whatever, and she really wants to find out what's going on and wants to take down Penelope, right? So she starts working on that, obviously gets help from Gino, who kind of is more so just to see what's kind of going on, like what's her angle, and then also from like Levi, who naturally is just sort of eavesdrops, or sort of like the headmaster's right hand to an extent. He kind of is a guy who just kind of always knows what's going on. And so Olive essentially makes the video and then the video kind of effectively shuts Penelope down, kind of is like the last thing that kind of finally like brings her down to not be popular, to not whatever. And so with that, Parker also played a role helping with the video, and then also, as I said before, Gino helps with it too. So they kind of end up getting into a disagreement about like what exactly happened, because obviously the video riles people up. Artemis isn't the happiest about the outcome of the video as well. So we kind of have the characters getting rowdy, kind of acting out of character about that. And so basically, as we all know, Mirren's making not the best decisions. She's, by this point, also has become, a singer for Axl's band, has that alter ego, and just a lot of like chaotic things are happening. So I said this would be rambly, so sorry. With that, let me go. I think I'm like right now I'm like chapter 17. So that kind of takes us back to okay, so the video, the documentary about Mirren or whatever is like around like the chapter 20s or so. By now, Mirren and Gino have sort of reconciled. They're not like really being romantic or anything, but they've kind of reconciled. They're kind of like, okay, well, maybe we just need to stop thinking about revenge as much and just more so like how are we just going to get through this? Because the school year will be ending relatively soon, like in a couple months. And at the end of the day, Mirren's objective wasn't necessarily to get revenge on Penelope. That was more of Gino's plan. It's just to kind of have her identity and just kind of get through it and then kind of figure it out as she goes along. So they're kind of getting to that point where they're not like, oh, we need to like have this scheme of like taking down Olive or taking down whoever. It's just more so like trying to survive through the whole shitty situation. And then you have Chara, who in the second book, Penelope kind of realizes that Chara is doing some kind of sneaky stuff or whatever, and then she kind of forces her to be her, I don't want to say lackey, but kind of is like, okay, well now, I've intercepted you, you're going to do what I need you to do or whatever. And so part of that is like making her break up with Wallace, and just sort of making her like be her, I don't know, her Blackie, which I said isn't the term that I want to use. So from there, Artemis at this point is also becoming kind of not distrusting, just kind of realizing that even though she initially started working with Olive to kind of get a sense of what was happening, Olive kind of is like a independent agent. She's not really doing anything to look good or to appease anyone. She's just trying to get the truth. And so that might mean undermining, Penelope and some other characters like Parker and whatnot further. And so she obviously is in sort of an interesting situation. So from there, okay, so back to the documentary or whatever. I know that Parker and Gino fight, but I just want to see why exactly they fight. Yeah, so I think they fight, Gino and Parker fight because Gino kind of implies that he was like closer to Mirren or whatever, that he liked her or whatever, and obviously Parker, was dating Penelope and didn't really like her, so that kind of infuriates him. They get into a fight. Penelope and Olive also get into a fight at the end because Olive releases this, like at the end of the documentary, this scene of Penelope and Artemis in the hospital talking about thinking that, what if Mirren isn't really dead, which is kind of what Olive initially felt was that maybe there's this cover up and that maybe Mirren isn't really dead and whatever. So anyways, like I said, Gino sort of aggravates Parker, kind of like talks his mouth, is kind of saying things that, like I knew Mirren or we were together or whatever at the assembly. That gets Parker mad. They get into a fight. They go to the infirmary. Mirren sort of goes to Gino and she's kind of like, oh, well, why'd you do that? You didn't have to do whatever. And at that time, she and Gino reconcile or whatever, or they actually kind of start their romantic relationship, which would be like chapter 28. But what happens is, through their moment, Gino finds out that Mirren essentially, that they had already kind of, had a moment on New Year's Eve in the second book. So he gets kind of annoyed because, he didn't realize that had happened and she had kept that from him. And so he storms off, obviously she's distraught or whatever. She then gets a message from Gino about I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, kind of be mad or whatever. Let's meet at the gazebo by the woods or whatever. And then it turns out it's not him, and it's these masked people, the football team most likely, and they kind of and they, attack her. They want to get answers about what's going on, and they kind of leave her they leave her injured or whatever, and then that kind of starts this next act of things that happen. So she gets attacked in the woods as Miles or whatever. At that point, Penelope reaches a really low point where, because of the video or whatever, Olive's documentary, and just everything that's going on, she just feels horrible and actually considers to, commit suicide, which Chara stops her. And then sort of Chara realizes that, even though Penelope's done these horrible things or whatever, she still is, human and has made mistakes, and decides to sort of flip and go on her side more so just because of some disagreements and just feeling kind of neglected from, Mirren and Gino and Wallace, obviously, because she broke up with him. So with that, that's when you kind of start this alliance between Chara and Penelope that's authentic. And now you have, with Mirren being attacked, she's sort of like keeping it a secret except for to like Levi, who knows everything. And then who else? Let me see. Yeah, what was I gonna say? Yeah, and then Parker is sort of at this point, he's the one who like initially like drives her back from the hospital or whatever. So he's like suspicious that things are going on. The school's kind of like cracking down on everything. They're like canceling prom, and everyone's just kind of like riled up about stuff because of everything's just kind of going to hell. At this point, Chara is, Chara and Mirren sort of, talk to each other, and, Chara at this point is kind of like, this has kind of gone too far, there are real emotions at stake or whatever, maybe we should consider, stopping this or whatever, and things are just in chaos. So, with that, what happens? What happens next? Yes, with that, they're just sort of like dealing with the storm of the video and the attack, the documentary. I keep saying video. The documentary, Mirren's documentary, and then her attack in the woods, trying to kind of get answers about what's happening. But what happens is, at this point, because everything's in chaos, the school board is kind of like, we don't like this. This is, reflecting poorly on our school, with admissions, blah, blah, blah. So we need, like, to get to the bottom of who's responsible for all of it, because we think someone's responsible for all of it. Or even if there isn't someone responsible for all of it, we need a scapegoat. So that's when Dr. Edsel has that, like, huge assembly where he's like, okay, I think these 7 people, whose names are constantly tossed in the mix, might play a role, be responsible. So, like Olive and Axel and Penelope and even Gino and Miles and some other people. Let me see if I can find the list, but even who else? So, but what ultimately happens is, I'm trying to think who he accuses or whatever, or I think Mirren tries to just like at that point be like, you know what, the jig is up. I'm just gonna say that I'm responsible for everything. I'm just gonna take the blame. Of which Parker is the one who decides to say, you know what, yeah, I'm responsible for everything. You don't expel me or whatever. And also to mention that, at this point, for like the past like several chapters now, Wallace is left to go to Yale, of which because he pretty much does that right after Chara leaves him, or Chara breaks up with him. So yeah, from there, Parker takes the blame, so he gets expelled. And then that kind of launches us to like the California arc, where they have their orchestra, whatever the thing. She and Gino, Mirren and Gino still aren't like super talky with each other, just because he's mad about the whole thing that happened between them. They eventually do reconcile when there's like a prank in in the dormitory on Mirren, and however at this point, Gino has kind of gotten a little bit more closey to Olive, just because of working on the video and then being like, all the stuff with Mirren and whatnot. So at this point, they come together, but then since Gino's like the orchestra prodigy, whatever, he has to kind of stay back and host some of the orchestra events while they're in California. So that gives her some downtime, of which she goes to Malibu, and then that's when she runs into Parker, who's in California or in LA because he's at something with like one of the schools, USC. And he, wants to meet up, and then it so happens that he like tracks her because, his brother's a tech genius, and he finds out that, she's been alive this entire time as Mirren as opposed to Miles. And so they kind of have, a heart to heart. And then, you have Gino eventually like being like, oh, I broke up with Olive, or I'm not like entertaining whatever I was entertaining with her. Let's be together. Let's just stop, playing games. He gives her the locket or whatever. But, naturally she's kind of conflicted because she, has gotten a little bit closer to Parker, and he now knows the truth. And she hasn't disclosed like pretty much anything to Gino at this time. He doesn't know anything about her like alter ego as Sarah, playing in the band with Axel. He doesn't know anything about her knowing, about Miss Cowdery knowing. And I think at this point, even Gemma knows this. She might know now that Gemma has also disclosed that she knows that Mirren is Miles, of which Gemma just kind of intuitively figured it out, I think, in the second book when Mirren was over for winter break. So that kind of concludes the first part of the book, like the first kind of part of the book, I guess. And then the second part, which maybe you're more familiar with, kind of is, I guess starts with the California arc, but more so is like, okay, they come back from California, things are, I guess, ideally better between Mirren and Gino, but Gino's still like in the dark about a lot of things. But at this point, Chara and Penelope have gotten closer. They're more like authentic friends now. Mirren and Gino are like an actual couple now or whatever. And I'm saying whatever a lot. There should be a whatever account. It should be a drinking game. At this point, they what do they do? What are they doing in this novel? So now they're just kind of at this point, there's like this video of the attack that's kind of getting floated around, of which I think Artemis had access to it, showed it to Parker. So Parker's aware of the attack now. And so there's like just the video, right? So at some point the video gets released. But obviously it's dark and whatnot, so even though Mirren is the one in the video, or Mirren or Miles is the one in the video, Wallace is the one who decides to take the blame, or not take the blame, who decides to say that he's the one who's in the video, and that attack is what prompted him to, leave Rinzin to go to just start college early or whatever. And so that starts the whole thing about who attacked her, how do we get to the bottom of this, especially now that, it's complicated with Wallace taking the blame or whatever. So, let me go to chapter 56 and see what that's about. So, so it's kind of getting to the bottom of who's might have played a role in everything. We kind of have an idea that it's, that we know that Axel and Cliff were part of the people who were there, but not why they were there. We know that Klondike probably, was there as well. We just don't know who called the hit, but we know that basically whoever called the hit has the influence to sort of get them what the attackers would want. So I know in one of the most recent updated chapters, Klondike was like, oh well, I was deferred at whatever Columbia, and this person had the power to whatever, make it work. So we, that makes us point fingers at people like Soren, who, is a billionaire, has influence, or really just, it could be anyone. It could be someone from the school board, who just wants all this kind of stuff to be resolved, wanted answers. So, yeah, I think I'm doing a really shitty job of telling you what happened. I just hope this kind of maybe, even if it's shitty, it's just kind of jogging your memory enough to kind of be coherently, okay, this is what happens. I'll try to do a really quick recap at the end of this as well. So yeah, the second part of the novel, as we know, is just very much the attack in the woods, who's responsible, what's all the little nuanced things that are happening in the background with all the characters in regards to it. So, you know, even though Wallace isn't really like in the picture that much, he's still he's still like present, just in the sense that it's, you know, he takes the blame for the thing that happened. He's still sort of pulling the strings by saying who he thinks is responsible, of which he says that he thinks Olive and Penelope are responsible. And so we're at the point where we're trying to see what they're going to do with that information, do because of that accusation, as well as you know, Mirren trying to really decide like what does she want. Does she want to just kind of keep the charade up, just like stay one more year of what she's been told by like Miss Cowdery and like even Parker, to just, you know, hold on, just maintain the illusion for another year and then graduate once you have an idea of what you want to do or whatever. But just seeing like how everything around her is shattering, like her relationship with Chara, just even Penelope, who's like now just completely fallen from grace. So her relationship with Gino as well, trying to weather that. Then also, you know, we introduce Ben, you know, Penelope's brother, the genius or whatever, that sort of is a reason why Mirren was brought to her family or whatever, to, you know, as this promising student or whatever that he potentially found or whatever. And just trying to see what the, you know, trying to see like what his plan for her is, because he wants her to, you know, he's actually like a positive influence in the sense that he wants her to, you know, make sure she gets the most out of what she's doing, not quick to expose her, even though he could. So yeah, this is really shitty. I'm sorry that this is a horrible recap, but I think at the end of the day, yeah, you really should just reread it all. But I think the biggest thing is just sort of at this stage, which I think we're on like chapter 72, and we'll talk about the incident, is just that we're just trying to figure out who's responsible for the attack, the rising skull, not the rising scar, the attack in the woods. What's their motivation? How do we like reconcile that? And now that Wallace has accused Olive and Penelope of being responsible for the for like knowing, like being responsible for calling the hit of the attack or whatever, what does that cause them? Like, how are they going to, you know, exonerate themselves? What is Artemis up to? Obviously she seems, you know, to be really quiet right now, which is never a good thing. You know, how is Mirren and Gino's relationship going to fend through all of this, you know? So yeah, let me know if this is a super shitty recap and I can redo it again. I know I missed a lot of big little things happening. There's like a lot of nuances, a lot of characters just doing a lot of things, but just basically it's like let's take 2 minutes. So basically, start novel where Mirren is gone because she's mad at Gino because he didn't want to expose Theodora for being responsible for the Rising Star Award incident, the soda spill that caused her to fight Penelope and then get her award taken away. She eventually comes back. They kind of get closer, reconcile or whatever. But then you have Olive sort of trying to do her video of Mirren, a documentary about her, and trying to figure out what's going on. She enlists in Artemis's help at that time, as well as like Chara and some other people like Parker and Levi. And Gino obviously tries to help, mostly just to kind of see what her angle is. The documentary is released, kind of shows some compromising information in regards to a conversation that Penelope and Artemis have, where they kind of imply that Mirren might be alive, but they don't really do much with that information, unfortunately, because Parker, gets mad because Gino kind of, teases or whatever at the end of that assembly that he was involved with Mirren, and they fight. Then, Mirren sort of talks to talks to Gino afterwards, sort of, they kind of officially come together as a couple or whatever. But then he gets mad when it comes, because she, has lied about some things when especially the New Year's Eve party where they sort of hook up, but he was drunk and he didn't remember, and she just kind of keeps that to herself, and so he's really mad about that. So they kind of break off. And then they're kind of like not really talking as much with each other, obviously throughout all of this, Wallace is doing this thing in Yale or whatever. You have Penelope, who is distraught by the documentary that really kind of takes her down completely. It's like the ultimate hit, and so she tries to kill herself. Chara intervenes, and so they kind of reconcile, they become close. And so then Mirren and Gino go to California. To mention, I think when Ben comes in and he's like, oh, well, I saw you in California. One of the things she does do when she has her off time in California and Gino is working the orchestra event or whatever, she goes to a medical seminar at UCLA that Ben is at. So that's what he meant, if that was confusing, because he just happened to be there or whatever. That's kind of a little tidbit. But anyways, so once they're in California, Gino and Mirren reconcile due to a prank that kind of puts Mirren in a compromising situation. They kind of get back together. However, at that time, Gino has gotten closer to Olive just because, because Mirren's being difficult, as well as just because of him getting closer to her, because of her wanting to try to keep an eye on her because of her sort of snooping and whatnot. So at that time, Parker's also in California because he's trying to talk to one of the sports scholarship people at University of Southern California, USC. And so then he wants to meet up with Miles, but then sort of meets up with Mirren as she is or whatever by accident. And so then he finds out, the whole secret identity thing. And then they get kind of close, they reconcile, so to speak. But then right at the end of the trip, Gino essentially says that he's, done with Olive, done with whatever, gives her a new locket, because she lost a locket in the fire that sort of places her in the fire at the end of the first book that they imply that she, dies in, because they found a body of someone else in the fire or whatever. But anyway, so so now she's very conflicted. But at that point, that kind of marks them becoming an official couple. And also around that point, maybe right before they go to California, I want to say, Gemma tells Mirren when she's with Miss Cowdery that she's aware of everything. So at this point now, Gemma has made it clear that she's aware, that she knows that Mirren is Miles because of the New Year's Eve party that occurs in the second book. So now that kind of brings us to the more recent updates that have been going on for the past couple of months or whatever. So with them trying to figure out who's responsible for the attack in the woods, Wallace taking the blame. Parker's expulsion has now been lifted or whatever, because they realize that they don't really have a leg to stand on in terms of accusing him. Ben coming in the picture to be once he sees her with Wallace. This is these are recent chapters that I've updated within the past week or so, whatever. And so now he wants to make sure she has her best interests in mind. And then obviously we have Chara and Penelope getting together, and then just planning for the end of the school year, which is coming up in the next month or so. And then things like prom, and then just trying to get to the bottom of everything before the whole series resolves, if that makes sense. So you have Artemis, who were oh, well, what is she up to? What's she been doing? How's that going to factor into the final conclusion, which will obviously be related to prom, shocker. And then what Penelope and Olive are going to do now that Wallace has accused them for playing a role in the attack in the woods. So yeah. Lastly, I know this is a super long video. We can talk a little bit just about the incident. So just let me know if you like it, or if you felt that it was the payoff wasn't quite what you thought it was. I think it's kind of an interesting twist, just in the sense that like you can see how it all makes sense. You can see why Penelope is justified for being really mad about what happened, and also just what's, you know, I think it just kind of makes sense. So I know it's not the most like, oh my gosh, like what happened, but I think it kind of like works out in the grand scheme of things. Like her, Mirren getting involved with Ben. Obviously Ben is, you know, Penelope's brother and whatnot. So there are a lot of, on top of the fact that her family is very not receptive to her, I can see why she would be pissed. So anyways, yeah, this is long enough. Please let me know if that made sense. I'm sorry. So again, hopefully the plan is for June 9th before 5 p.m. Eastern to have the whole like mass update of chapters, the last 13 or so chapters. And then after that, maybe a couple days later, I can do like a what, you know, the videos that you do, but it's like in real time and you can like comment and whatever, like a stream. We could do something like that. So let me know if you want me to clarify anything. I can do that. I can make a whole new video or not. Okay, thank you for watching. Have a good one. Bye.